on in. So this is being recorded, and everyone who registered will, in a couple of days, get a link to the recording up on the Libertyville Historical Society's YouTube channel. And what else have I got housekeeping wise? Let's see, please hold all your questions until the end, especially those online. Tie your hand down. Right now, for those of you online, I am looking at the presentation. I will not see any chats or Q&A while I am presenting, but I will switch to that when I'm done. So go ahead and put your information into the chat, into the Q&A, and we will address all of those at the end. And we're recording. I can't see you. Okay, we're good. All right, I'm going to go off of video because I'd rather you be focusing. People in the room can see my face, but people online, I'd rather you be focusing on the content than looking at me. All right, and that way I can also step to the side a little bit. Okay. Get that going. All right. So just a couple of announcements. I should introduce myself. My name is Jenny Berry. I am the local history librarian here at the Cook Memorial Library, and I'm standing on my tiptoes. But I'm here today as a member of the Libertyville Historical Society. The History Matters series, the Historical Society does 6 of them each year. They are in September, October, and November, and then again in March, April, and May. The library is very nice to host us, as well as advertise them on their events calendar and in the ins and outs. So we don't have our spring set up yet, but keep an eye out for that. Hi, welcome. But we do have our November program. Now, the November program will be in person only. There is not a Zoom option for the November program. And we will have Carolyn Law of Carolyn Law Antiques here. She's going to be talking about how to investigate and record stuff about your family heirlooms. So how do you learn more about the things that you have from your family? She does allow people to bring one handheld item. Now, she's not doing appraisals, but she will kind of use some of your objects as examples of how you might research them for that. So that is in November. If you'd like to attend that, you can sign up online or call the library or stop at any library desk and they can get you registered for that. And I know it's not Halloween yet. And I don't like seeing Christmas commercials on TV any more than you do. But I did want to say that the next time that the Ansleby Cook Home is open will be during the holiday season. As usual, we are open right after the tree lighting, which is the Friday after Thanksgiving. We'll be open till 8:30 that evening. And then we are open during Dickens of a Holidays on December 6th and December 13th, both Saturdays, from 11 to 3. And we ask for $5 for adults, and kids are free to enter the Cook Home. No reservations are necessary. And one more advertisement. Again, these are put on by the Libertyville Historical Society. So if you enjoy these programs, we invite you to become a member. You can be a financial supporter, or you can be a volunteer. There's information on the Historical Society's website. All right, but we're all here tonight to talk about the gate. Right. All right. So we're going to talk about what people have said has happened there, what people have said they've seen there, and then I'm going to tell you what I've been able to find in the historical record so that you know what may or may not have happened there. Okay, so where is this gate? Right, so this gate is north of town. If you drive up off of that direction, Buckley Road, turn left on River Road and go up to where it starts to curve around to the east. It used to be Daybreak Farms there. Now it's called something else. There's a horse farm right there. But the gate is just to the left as you go around that curve. This is the gate that we're talking about. All right. There's lots of variations on a theme. There might have been a girls' finishing school, or there might have been a summer camp, or of course, there may have been an asylum. At the school, either a principal had a mental breakdown or a janitor killed some students. At the camp, either a camp counselor or a man who had escaped from an asylum, nice crossover, or a nun killed some children. And in another case, if it was an asylum, a ward attendant went insane and murdered some charges. See if I can get this to go away. There we go. Okay, sorry about that. All right. In any case, some kids got killed and their heads got put on the spikes of the gate. Okay. Now, there is a book called More Chicago Haunts, which was published in the year 2000 by an author named Ursula Belsky, and she wrote, "The killer was caught and presumably imprisoned or executed. The trauma shattered the school, which at once closed and which stood empty for years in the clearing beyond the trees. After talk of a haunted school and memories, the old building recall became unbearable to residents and officials. A movement was begun to tear down the school and turn the area into a nature preserve. The push for the preserve was a great success, and soon it seemed all traces of St. Francis School for Girls was gone from the site. The new preserve was christened Independence Grove as a tribute to the survivors of the massacre, who, though the demolition of the school, have been freed from the physical reminders of that awful night." All right, so why is that forest reserve called Independence Grove? It was the early name of Libertyville. Okay, so you're going to see along the way, as we look, that there is some factual basis to some of these legends, but we'll see how much of it is true and how much of it isn't true as we go along. Okay. So those are some of the stories that have been told about what happened behind the gate. There have been in different newspaper articles, people have reported and seen different things near the gate. People have reported seeing blood dripping from the iron posts. At the stroke of midnight on the anniversary of the murders, which of course is Halloween, phantom heads appear on the fence posts. People have seen a headless nun roaming the woods. The ghost of a small boy spotted staring out from behind the iron posts. Residents in the surrounding area describe seeing figures in 1930s era clothing, either in their homes or in the nearby farm fields. And of course, there are apparitions, eerie screams, and mysterious sounds. So with all these stories swirling around, it seemed like a little historical research was in order. The main part of the history of the gate begins in 1925, but we can go a little farther back than that with some of the information we have. Okay. So before 1925, really, this is an 1861 plat map. The pink line is approximately River Road. And at that time, a gentleman named William Boardman owned the land in that area. He was born in Fayette, New York in 1805. He came first to Little Fort, which is Waukegan today, in 1846. And sometime that same year, he purchased property in Libertyville Township. He lived with his wife, Betsy, and their 4 children, and his father-in-law. And his youngest son, George Boardman, enlisted with the 17th Illinois Cavalry in January 1864, mustering out in November of 1865. Now, Mr. Boardman died August 30th, 1864 at the age of 59, and he's buried with his wife and 3 of his children at Lakeside Cemetery. Now, property was sold sometime after 1864. The next owner was Solomon Kelsey. He came from Oswego County, where he was born in 1825. He came west in 1853 and settled in Lake County. He was married twice, and he died in 1906. But in this 1915 plat map, we're still seeing that land as under the estate. That's what the EST is, estate of Solomon Kelsey. But the story of the gate really begins when Chicago resident Britton I. Budd bought the property in 1925. Bud had worked in the railway shops of the Intramural Railway at the Columbian Exposition, and 2 years later became storehouse clerk for the Metropolitan West Side Elevated Railroad. He became general manager by 1907 and president by 1910. Later, he became president of the Chicago Elevated Railways Company, the North Shore Railway, and the Chicago, Aurora, and Elgin Railroad. And when his friend Samuel Insull was elected chairman of the Public Service Company of Northern Illinois in 1923, Bud was elected president. He then became vice chairman in 1951 and retired in 1952. Now, he was also really involved in charitable activities. He was a trustee on the executive committee of the Century of Progress Exposition in 1933-34. He was a founder of the Chicago Boys Club. He was a director of the American Red Cross, a director for John Cruer Library at the University of Chicago, a trustee for DePaul University, and the University of Chicago Cancer Research Foundation. He established the Britton I. Budd Medal for the Saving of Human Life. And there is actually still a standing Chicago Housing Authority building, still standing, named after him, the Britton Budd Apartments in Chicago. But Doddridge comes from his wife's name. This is Catherine Cray Budd, actually Catherine Doddridge Cray Budd. She was married to Britton in 1900, and she passed away in 1925 after a protracted illness. And a Chicago Tribune obituary reported said that she was known for her intellectual attainments, her study of art, astronomy, architecture, and history. And she was a treasurer of the Guild of the Associated Sisters of Mary of the Episcopal Church, and was known for her work with poor and crippled children. And when she passed away, Britton Budd decided to build a memorial to his wife and her work. And he acquired 200 acres along the Des Plaines River, north of Libertyville, with the intention to build a summer home for orphans of St. Mary's Orphanage on Jackson Avenue in Chicago. And newspaper articles reported that architects Cram and Ferguson of Boston would be designing a main building, which would be the headquarters of the school, as well as dormitory for the sisters and as a chapel. So just yesterday, I got an email from Cram and Ferguson, and they don't have any records of this commission. So it's not clear whether whatever plans were going to be drawn up were actually implemented by, or were drawn up, or were used for the camp. But by the time of the dedication on June 27th, 1926, 15 buildings had been constructed. Now, the Best Buy or Done Museum of Lake County has an original copy of the dedication pamphlet, which I have some pictures of here. It details the camp's facilities, which included cottages for girls ages 3 to 14. It also had a dining hall, a chapel, a recreation hall, bathhouse, infirmary, a house for the nuns, other employee housing, an outdoor chapel, a swimming pool, and a playground. So although it was often referred to as a home, I haven't found any evidence that there was like a singular residence or a large dormitory or an orphanage per se. It really was, and we'll see some pictures as we go along, a camp with cottages and other buildings supporting a camp. So here's some pictures. On the left, we have our gate, much better picture than the picture I took. And on the right, very nice outdoor swimming pool. A couple more pictures of the pool. I mean, it's quite fancy. Very nice aerial photo on the left. Here we have on the left the infirmary and the nun's house, and on the right the altar, the outdoor altar that was built on the grounds. And then here on the left we have the recreation hall with a large water tower out back, both the exterior of the hall and the interior of the hall, which again looks pretty nice. So it was really built as a summer home again for those the orphan girls who would come up during the summer. Between 1930 and 1936, it was also used by the Episcopal Church as an annual retreat location for clergymen. And in 1934, Charles Taft II, who was the son of President William H. Taft, spoke at one of the annual retreats. During the Depression, the camp was loaned to the Illinois Emergency Commission for use as a summer camp for women on the relief rolls who needed convalescent care. Qualifying women could stay for at least 1 month and were expected to contribute 2 hours of work each day. The camp during this time also welcomed unemployed young women ages 16 to 25, maybe that's for the girls' school, for an 8-week course of home management skills, vocation instruction, and job finding skills. But it wasn't all work and no play. This newspaper article we're looking at here reported that swimming and tap dancing were 2 of the most popular courses, and the camp also provided date days so that their boyfriends could come and visit. In 1936, the Episcopal Church signed an agreement to lease Doddridge Farm to the Boy Scouts of America rent-free until January 1st of 1938, after which the Boy Scouts would have the option to renew for another 10 years. The Episcopal bishop, who was Bishop Stewart, said at the time, "The trustees therefore decide to forego the use of Doddridge Farm for activities in order to meet a pressing need in a broader field." Sounded like they couldn't spend the money, maybe, to keep it up. So at that point, the farm offered 18 buildings with running water and all modern sanitary facilities, in quotes. And it was reported that the Scouts were going to add a bunch of tent equipment to be able to hold several hundred boys. So by May 1937, Troop 223 from St. Luke's Episcopal Church in Chicago was the first Scout unit from the city to register for summer camping at Camp Doddridge. My son was a Boy Scout and he went to Camp Makajuan in northern Wisconsin. And I kind of imagined that this was a similar kind of thing where your troop would go for the week and take advantage of all the camping facilities there. In October of 1938, a Boy Scout powwow was held there and it was expected that 1,000 boys would attend. But it wasn't just the Boy Scouts who used the facilities. Our local paper, the Independent Register, printed this photo of Girl Scouts taking swimming lessons in 1939. The Boy Scouts chose not to renew their free lease, and the Episcopal Church decided to sell the property. The Catholic Youth Organization, or CYO, purchased the property and owned it for the next 40 years. But the CYO's initial plans were not to use the property as a children's camp. Instead, the head of the CYO, who is Bishop Bernard Shield, invited the Ladies of the Grail to take residence. The Grail began in Holland in 1921 as a Catholic lay organization called the Women of Nazareth. It was founded by a Jesuit priest, Jacques van Ginkenken. But from the beginning, women directed the activities of the Grail. They staged massive, colorful rallies and enacted religious dramas, working with young women in Holland, England, and Germany. In May 1940, 2 of the Dutch Grail women, Linvijn van Kersbergen and Joan Overbos, who are seen in the center and the left, respectively here, came to the United States at the invitation of the Archbishop and began their work at Doddridge Farm. So as I said, that the original directive that they received was not to do a camp, but they were assigned to prepare for what they thought would be the arrival of 500 refugee children from war-torn Europe. Both the Chicago Tribune and the Independent Register ran stories that Doddridge Farm would be open and available to taking in some children. And they even held a dance fundraiser. This particular one was held at the Stevens Hotel on Michigan Avenue, which today is the Hotel Hilton, Chicago, right on Michigan Avenue. But according to the book, Women Breaking Boundaries, a Grail Journey, no refugee children were forthcoming. I did a little more digging, and from what I could find, it seemed like this was through a group called the UK Children's Overseas Reception Board, and they were in general destined for UK dominions, so Canada, Australia, for example. Immigration regulations at the time prevented landing at American ports for persons whose passage had been paid by a foreign government, so in this case, the UK government. So British children had to go to Canada and then try to enter the US through the regular immigration yearly or monthly quota. The program was canceled in the fall of 1940 due to the expected rough passage coming across the Atlantic during the winter, and also in response that 3 ships that had been carrying children had been attacked by U-boats. In most cases, most of the children survived. There were not major sinkings. So in any case, there were no refugees showing up at Doddridge Farm. So Bishop Shield changed the Grail's assigned task to run summer camps for girls from the inner city. He gave them $5,000 for budget, and the Grail agreed to provide staff at no salary. And this is actually, I'm sorry, the caption's covered up for those in the room at the bottom. This is actually a photograph of Doddridge Farm. You can see sort of the cabin-like dormitories in the back there. This was an article about the Grail in Libertyville in Time magazine in 1941. So they opened up a camp in 1941, and there were, for a multicultural group of children, there were 20 boys from a Catholic institution who were there as well to take care of landscaping under the charge of CYO staff. We'll find out in a minute if that was a good thing or not. This is how the Grail described the camp. It was laid out as a little village with a chapel at one end, dining hall in the middle, the assembly hall and swimming pool at the other end, dormitories in between, all nicely landscaped and connected with winding paths. Volunteers under Grail direction had painted the buildings in bright colors, yellow, blue, and green. All the colors of the rainbow adorned the rafters in the assembly hall. There were 20 girls and 5 leaders in each of the cottages. Each camping group would stay 2 weeks, and kids had to help with camp chores. This is what I find really fun. The buildings and the tasks were all renamed according to the legend of the Grail, right? So the dormitories are all named after the knights. The swimming pool is called the Swan. It's slightly covered up for those of you in the room. This is my favorite. Cleaning was called Slaying the Dragon. I don't know if that makes it like you want to do it more. Anyway, it seems like a fun renaming the Grail applied to the buildings. Oh, sorry about that. The font in my presentation is all messed up on this slide. Once summer camp was over, a small group of Grail members stayed at Doddridge over the winter, but the buildings had been built for summer. They didn't have like a foundation. They didn't have space heat. They had space heaters that burnt oil. So it was not a great place to stay over the winter. And during this time, problems developed between the Ladies of the Grail and the CYO. The Grail really didn't want to run summer camps. That was not what they were there to do. There were different levels of activity going on at Doddridge Farm. There was the camp program. There was training for counselors and training for people going into the Ladies of the Grail. Now, this information is from the Grail history, so it could be slightly, biased. They said that the bishop never explicitly disagreed with the Grail's goals. He often simply ignored them. One of the first disagreements had been over initial repairs. So according to the Grail, the camp had been vacant a long time and was dirty and dilapidated, and repairs had been mismanaged. The boys who were there to work were also a hindrance. They went joyriding in visitors' cars. They started a fire in the bathhouse. They damaged a farm truck and a mowing machine. There was an untrustworthy caretaker who tried to sell tools from the farm in town. And the Grail said the CYO was undermining their authority over the camp program. The Grail said the CYO encouraged children and counselors to ignore Grail rules. They say that the bishop thought the Grail was too strict and pious with regard to dress, smoking, and drinking. And they were experiencing difficulties with mixed gender. So there were acres of grounds, and it's hard to supervise keeping boys and girls separate. The Catholic brothers who were in charge allowed the boys to hang around the dormitories and take older girls for walks in the woods. One junior counselor stayed out in the woods with a boy until after midnight. She got sent home. Bishop Shield disagreed, saying the Grail didn't understand American youth. This is the early 1940s. So in the spring of 1943, the relations was not good. And the bishop announced that Doddridge would be turned into a boys' camp for the following summer. It was time for the Grail to go. They moved first to Childerley, which was a country estate near Wheeling for the summer, and then moved to a permanent home called Grailville outside of Cincinnati, Ohio, which is still in operation today. All right, so the CYO took over and offered a boys' camp at Doddridge Farm between 1943 and 1954. Responsibility moved to Catholic Charities in 55, and the organization operated the camp for almost 2 decades. And we have a copy here of some of the pages from the camp brochure. It was called St. Francis Camp for Boys, and the goal was to build men for Christ through play. There are 2 resident priests, a director and chaplain, and 12 seminarians to serve as counselors and program advisors. And they took in Catholic boys between ages of 8 and 13 for 2-week periods between mid-June and mid-August. And this is some information about what they might be expected to bring. Apparently, whoever this owned this brochure checked off most things, but was not going to be bringing a comb or hairbrush. You could bring some money. There was no laundry on site, so they needed to bring, although it's interesting, it says, there are no laundry facilities at camp for the washing of boys' clothing, but under incidentals, it is recommended you bring a laundry bag, I assume, so you can put your stinky clothes just away. And this was their daily schedule. So they were up for more than an hour before breakfast was served. Looks like they were kept going pretty much all day. They had access to swimming. They had first aid classes, crafts, nature lore, archery, athletics, outdoor life, and campouts. They learned how to make belts and wallets, model planes and ships. They could work with tin, lanyard craft, wire craft, and woodcraft. And there was also softball, volleyball, basketball, and a field day at the end of each session. And what's really nice is that we have a map of where the buildings were. And the red star is the gate. So River Road is going north, although it's along the top of the screen here. And then you would turn in at the gate and come around to where all these buildings were. So you can see there was a basketball court, chapel. At this point, the dining halls are not named after knights. They look like they're named after saints, Franciscan saints probably. Shower hall by the pool, big assembly hall. You can go down to the woods and to the river. Now, there is a 1981 history of the Chicago Archdiocese summer camp. And in that, the St. Francis Camp for Boys closed in 1973 due to aging facilities and a shortage of capital funds, and also a decreasing staff due to a drop in seminary enrollment. We got a seminary close by, but if you don't have enough seminarians to run the camp, that's a hardship. After that, Doddridge Farm had one more life as a camp. It reopened in 1974 as Camp St. Francis for girls aged 6 to 13. Again, it was functioning on a shoestring budget. And then according to that Archdiocese history, in October 1979, the camp was closed and demolished. This is a platted survey that the Lake County Forest Preserve shared with me. It was originally drawn in 1974. The Lake County Forest Reserve had acquired that sort of bottom left-hand section in 1974. when the buildings still existed, which is why they're on this map. In 1982, the Forest Preserve acquired the other section from Catholic Charities. So this is from Lake County Maps Online. I've just picked out 3 aerials to kind of show you how the area has changed over time. This is 1946, and it's nice because the trees aren't really filled out yet. So you can see, up at the top, coming on the far right-hand side, you've got River Road coming up, and you turn to the right and continue on River Road, or turn to the left. The gate would be up in that far right-hand corner of this slide. And then you can come in and you kind of see where the rest of the drives went. It looks fairly similar to this map that we saw here on the previous slide. So that's 1946. This is 1993. And that's 2000. So you can see that by this time, I almost called it Millennium Park. My husband thinks that Independence Grove is called Millennium Park because it was opened at the Millennium. You can tell Independence Grove was set up by now, and the path is going up through St. Francis Woods that you can ride your bike on in this picture. Okay. So today it's called St. Francis Woods. And there have been volunteer stewards working there since 1985. They volunteer year-round, cutting buckthorn and clearing brush and pulling garlic mustard. They would love for you to join them if you're interested in doing some of that environmental work. Here are some of them in action back in 2013 when a couple of Historical Society members went out to meet them, and they gave us a quick tour of some of the pictures I'm going to show you in a minute. All right, so I've covered pretty much what's been on that land since the beginning. So what about the legend? So how did any of this stuff get started? So I went looking for anything quote unquote bad that was recorded there. Now, most of our research is just done in local newspapers. We don't have, access to other things, but I'll share with you what I could find that was even slightly bad, and some of it's a little bit worse. So in 1928, Lyle Graham fractured his humerus as a result of a fall he received while riding a donkey at the Doddridge farm. Got a broken wrist in 1929, and there was a house fire. I'm not sure which of the buildings. It could have been the caretaker's house, or it could have been the nuns' dormitory. There's a fire in 1941 due to an overheated furnace. Okay. So none of those feed into the legends that we talked about at the beginning, really. Okay. So in 1943, Edward F. Thomas, who was a watchman at the CYO camp at Doddridge Farm, was arrested early in the morning northeast of Libertyville. He was carrying a loaded revolver and a flashlight and was with another man. The 2 men were taken to the Lake County Jail in Waukegan. So at 11:30 a.m., he was refusing to eat. When a deputy went to the cell at 12:15, Thomas had escaped. Although he was 6 feet tall and 180 pounds, he apparently had climbed on the bed, stripped away a bit of the corrugated ceiling, and went into the attic at the Lake County Jail in Waukegan. From there, he went into the sheriff's residence, which was right next door, and exited out a window. The sheriff had been sitting in the adjoining room. This may or may not be the untrustworthy caretaker that was mentioned by the Grail. He must have been caught because in a November 14th, 1943 Trib article, it was reported that while in jail, Thomas and another inmate complained about the service. Sheriff Atkinson told the newspaper, quote, "These 2 fellows regard themselves as star boarders at a summer resort. You should hear them scream for fresh sheets and real cream in their coffee." Now, they were the only 2 inmates in the jail at the time, so maybe they expected a higher level of service. I'm doubting that they received what they were asked for. Now, this one is probably one of the saddest. In May 1961, Glenn, I'm going to say his name wrong, Bortorf, some of you might have known the family. He was just 2.5 years old, and he drowned in the river adjacent to St. Francis Camp for Boys. He was the son of Mrs. and Mr. Paul Bortorf, who lived on the land just south of Doddridge. Mr. Bortorf was president of Trim Inc., an electronics manufacturer, which had a factory at 400 West Lake Libertyville, and some of you may remember when that factory was here. The little boy was playing with his 5-year-old sister in the woods. She went home to ask her mother if she and her brother could eat lunch in the woods, and when she went back, she couldn't find him. Volunteer searchers were gathered, and sheriff's office squads were due to report to the area when the family dog came running up from the river and eventually led them to the boy. I did find one murder with a tie to the area. In June 2002, dog units discovered woman's remains at the Camp St. Francis Preserve. The woman's husband worked as a horse trainer at Daybreak Farm Stables, which is right there. He was charged with a murder, but spent 6 years on the run. He was found in 2008 and convicted in April 2013. Okay. So none of those are about anybody going crazy at a girls' school or an asylum or a camp. I mean, that murder that we just looked at is way too late for when people remember starting to hear about the legend. So I've just made a best guess that it started about the mid-1980s. I remember it barely. I graduated in 1988, and I have this vague memory of my friends saying they were going up to some gate, and I was like, what? Yeah. And often the local newspapers run a like haunted places to visit this time of year. There was a 1983 Pioneer Press article which did not mention it at all among local ghost stories, but now it's mentioned like in every one. There's a big stone gate with a drive that leads to nowhere, and the pictures at the bottom are slightly cut off. Again, these were taken in 2012, I think, and I haven't been up there to look for these since. I should also mention this was when one of the stewards took us off the path. It is not encouraged to go off the path and go into our environmentally sensitive areas. That's my disclaimer. But there's like a little sinkhole there. The middle one is actually a light post. And on the right is a fire hydrant, which at that time you could see right off of the bike path. So you've got this big gate and you're biking down and you see a fire hydrant in the middle of the forest preserve. Seems like a great way to start some story. When I put this presentation together, again, a little over 10 years ago, I posted on the Vintage Liberal Facebook group, which is generally people who grew up in Libertyville 50s, 60s, 70s, and said, hey, have you heard anything about this? And pretty much nobody said that they had. But I'll tell you a little bit of some of the responses I've got here. Someone said, I'd ride my horse through the gate to get to the river trail, which was behind the boys' camp there at the time. Years later in college, my boyfriend told me he attended that camp, recalled my horse and dog exactly, didn't notice me at the time, and says he never heard any stories either. Someone else said, we rode our bikes past there and into all there all the time, and I never heard of the ghost stories. We met some of the boys from the camp too. I lived on River Road, just south of CYO camp for 20 years, between 1953 and 73. We rode bikes through, had a church picnic, and went to a dance there once in high school, and I never heard of the gate until my daughter and friend told me about it in about 1985. A neighbor who still lives there sent me an article about the ghost story in some newspaper about 5 years ago. But then we had someone said, we knew about this story. I went to St. Joe's, graduated in 1990, and we drove on River Road for our bus run. It was a popular story for our age group, and the bottom of that says, scared me, what is it, scared me to bits or something like that. Scared me silly. All right. So again, my best guess is that it started in the late 80s, early 90s, based on the people who have heard of it and never heard of it. Now, the legend still lives on. In 1999, after seeing the Blair Witch Project, for those of you who remember that, 5 teens went to the gate to investigate. They woke up nearby homeowners and received $75 tickets for being in the forest preserve after hours. So my second disclaimer is I am not encouraging you to go visit the gate after dark when the forest preserve is closed. Don't tell me if you go. I don't want to know. And we still occasionally get questions at the Cook Library. And the fact that there are some, I'm assuming, high school age students here. that have probably heard about it means that it is still getting passed around. This is 2012. I don't know what throwing your pumpkin over the gate is supposed to signify, but people will, at least then, would throw their Halloween pumpkins over the gate. So I want to give you a couple of glimpses of the past. As I mentioned, we were able to go off trail, and the steward pointed out sort of remnants of the buildings that were still there at least 10 years ago. So I'll show you a couple of things. So here is our swimming pool. And where the red line is the foundation of the swimming pool, the edge of the swimming pool that was out there in the middle of the woods. They had a big changing room near the swimming pool. And it's hard to see, but that red line again is showing where the foundation of that pool house was. Behind the recreation hall, there was a very large water tower. And if you're in the right place, you can see the foundation piers for the water tower. And of course, there is our gate, which is still there today. And the most obvious thing that you can see, that's a reminder of Doddridge Farm and all the incarnations of camps that were there over about the last, well, up until the 70s. So from 1925 to the end of the 1970s. Okay. So that is what I've been able to learn about the activities and the buildings and the people that were behind the gate. And I am going to, at this point, bring up the chat. Just to let you know, for those of you online, when I bring up the chat, your name and your chat will be on the screen in front of the people in the room. So just be aware. Let me bring that up, and then I will kind of try and go back and forth and take questions from the room and from people online. Okay. Is there anyone who has a question in the room while we're waiting for anyone online? Does anyone want to? Yeah, go ahead.
Farm is still there that you were talking about before. It's called Independent Farm. And that fire hydrant is right up to the trail.
It's still there.
Something jumps and take a left and just go a little bit. And hydrant across the top is still there.
Right there. Okay. For those of you online, we were talking about Daybreak Farms. It's called Independence Farms now. Yep. And the fire hydrant is still there off the bike path. You can see it. Any other questions? Anybody want to share? I don't know if I can repeat all of it, but anybody want to share a story of your experience with the gate? Has anyone been to the gate at midnight on Halloween? No. Okay. It's coming up, but don't tell me. Okay. Well, I don't see anything in the chat. Let me just see if there's anything in the Q&A. It's along here somewhere. No, no questions there. Okay. All right. Well, if you think of something later. Yes, ma'am.
What are the stories that they talk about in local haunted places that stand out? Are they ghost sightings?
I don't know off the top of my head, but we have a folder full of articles here that I can take you to afterwards. I just don't remember. Besides the gate, I don't remember there being anything else local. But you would probably recognize some of the place. I don't know. It seems to me like the Mineola in Fox Lake might have been mentioned at one point. I'm not even sure if the Mineola is still there. Places like that. But I'd be happy to pull that file for anyone who wants to look at what kind of other places to go visit in the area. Oh, if there's something in the chat. Hold on a second. Yep, thank you. I spent 8 years at the camp. The buildings were named after cities in Italy, places of St. Francis. Thank you, Lori. And Lori, can I ask you, were there any like, Diana, I'll answer your question in just a second. Lori, were there any, like while you were at camp, were there any stories? It seems like all camps have stories of like a murderer in the woods, right? Is the gate open when the forest reserve is open? The gate is actually never closed. I don't know if it can be closed. It's just a decorative. It's not a barrier. So you should be able to walk through it at any time. It's just the forest reserve closes at dusk. Right. Okay. All right. I should say one thing I did not mention, and then I will let you go. After I did this presentation in 2013, someone did reach out to me and said she had heard, or she knew, I can't remember now, that the legend was started by a high school teacher as a social experiment to see how quickly a story would spread. So whether I never followed up on that to see if I could figure out who it might have been, but whether it was a high school teacher or just someone in the community, obviously the legends are still around, somewhat based on things we learned, right? There were nuns there were girls there were camps there, but there's nothing there today. So let me just see. Lori had something else to say. I can't see it though. Oh yeah, they heard stories from the friars. So I mean, it could have been, if someone's had a story and went to that camp and then went home and said, guess what I just learned from the camp, that could also do it. But what amazed me when I did this research originally, the camp was also used by Saint Sava, S-A-V-A probably, the one up on Milwaukee Avenue. What amazed me was that there was so much activity there, right? And as you ride your bike or walk through it today, besides the fact that there's little pieces of evidence, you would never know that there was, serious things going on behind the gate for years and years and years. So, well, thank you very much to everyone in person and online. Again, I will be posting the recording within a couple of days. If you have any follow-up questions that hit you after the fact, you can reach out to me either through the Historical Society or through the library. And I'm happy to, pull the clippings out if you want to read through the clippings file for this, or anything else, any other local history questions you might have. Thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your October.